For decades, people have talked about the rapture. Countless prophecies have been given concerning the second coming of Jesus Christ. Yet despite all that has been said, many people still do not understand what the rapture truly is. In this video, I will share the testimony of a man who died and was miraculously brought back to life. During his experience, he was shown what the rapture will be like and what humanity should expect in the near future. What he saw changed his understanding of eternity forever. Before we begin, I would love to know where you are watching from. Leave your city and country in the comments below. I enjoy seeing how far these messages reach, and our prayer team would be honored to pray for your city and your family. If this message blesses you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Now listen carefully, and may God bless you through this testimony. Hello, Daily Renewal team. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my testimony on your platform. May God bless you and your team. I want to start by telling you who I was before all this happened, because I think it matters. You need to understand what kind of man I was, so you can understand how much this changed me. I have called myself a Christian since I was a young man. I went to church most of my life. I believed in Jesus. I believed the Bible was true. I was not pretending. My faith was real to me. But somewhere along the way, my faith became more about knowledge than it was about closeness with Christ. I am not proud to say that, but it is the truth. I followed prophecy teachers online. I watched videos every single day about world events and how they lined up with what the Bible said about the last days. I read articles about wars, about new laws, about strange weather, about technology that seemed to match descriptions from the book of Revelation. I had notebooks filled with timelines I had drawn out myself, trying to figure out when things might happen. I was always trying to figure out the next sign, the next piece of the puzzle. At night, instead of praying like I used to when I was younger, I would lay in bed with my phone in my hand, scrolling through prophecy channels until 2 or 3 in the morning. My wife would ask me to come to bed, and I would tell her just a few more minutes, but those minutes turned into hours more times than I want to admit. I was afraid. I will say that plainly. I was afraid of the future. I was afraid of suffering. I was afraid that I would not be ready when hard times came, whatever those hard times would look like. I was afraid of the tribulation that so many teachers spoke about. I pictured terrible things happening to the world, and I wondered if I would survive them, if my family would survive them. This fear sat in my chest most days. It was like carrying a heavy stone that never put itself down. I told myself that being aware of prophecy was a form of being a faithful Christian, that I was simply being watchful like the Bible tells us to be. But if I am honest with you now, watching had turned into worrying, and worrying had turned into something close to obsession. I spent more hours studying signs of the end than I spent in quiet time with Jesus. I knew more about charts and theories than I knew about resting in His presence. My relationship with Him had become distant, even though my head was full of facts about Him and about what was coming. I also want you to know that my body had been struggling for a long time before this happened. I had heart problems for years. I had been in and out of hospitals more times than I can count. My doctors had told me many times that my heart was weak, that I needed to slow down, that my body could not keep up the way it used to. I had grown used to feeling tired all the time, used to chest pain that came and went, used to medication schedules that filled my kitchen counter. So when the 8th of March came, in some strange way, my body had already been preparing for something like this for years. I just did not know that day would be the day everything changed. That morning started like most mornings. I remember it was quiet in the house. My wife had already gone to make coffee. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I felt a tightness in my chest that was different from what I usually felt. It was sharper. It spread down my arm in a way that made my stomach turn. I tried to call out to her, but my voice did not come out the way I wanted it to. It came out weak, almost like a whisper that got lost before it reached the door. I remember trying to stand up, and my legs would not hold me the way they should have. I fell back onto the bed, and everything in my chest felt like it was being squeezed by something I could not see. She heard something, maybe the sound of me falling, and she came running. I remember her face when she saw me. I will never forget that look, the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook when she touched my face and asked me what was wrong. I tried to answer her, but the pain had taken over everything. My ears were ringing. My vision was getting dark around the edges, like someone was slowly closing curtains around what I could see. She called for help right away. I remember hearing her voice on the phone talking fast, giving our address, telling them to hurry. I remember her hands on my chest, pressing down, trying to keep my heart going the way she had learned to do in a class years before. I could feel the weight of her hands, but it felt far away, like it was happening to someone else's body, not mine. The ambulance came. I remember pieces of it, like watching something through fog. Men in uniforms lifting me, the cold air outside, the bright lights inside the vehicle, the sound of machines beeping in a rhythm that did not sound right. I remember someone saying my heart rate was dropping fast. I remember my wife's voice somewhere close, crying, saying my name over and over. And then, slowly, the pain started to fade. Not because it got better, but because something in me started to let go of it. I want to explain what happened next, as carefully as I can, because words do not fit it perfectly. There was a moment where I felt myself rising, not with my body, but with something that was still me, still aware, still feeling. I looked down and I saw the back of an ambulance. I saw my own body lying there, pale, with tubes and wires attached to it. I saw the paramedic working on my chest, pressing hard sweat on his forehead. I saw my wife sitting near my feet, her hands covering her mouth, tears falling down without stopping. At first, I was confused. I did not understand what I was seeing. Part of me thought maybe I was dreaming, or maybe this was some kind of medication making my mind play tricks on me. But the longer I watched, the more it became clear to me. That body down there was mine, and I was no longer fully inside of it. I felt fear rise up in me at first, the same kind of fear I had carried for years about the end of the world. I thought, this is it, this is the moment I have been afraid of for so long. I expected darkness. I expected judgment to come crashing down on me the way I had imagined it so many times while watching those prophecy videos late at night. I braced myself the way you brace yourself before something painful, but that is not what happened. Instead, I felt myself moving, not falling, not being pulled, just moving calmly, the way a leaf moves on top of water when the current is gentle. There was darkness around me for a short time, but it did not feel cold or threatening. It felt more like closing your eyes in a quiet room, safe, unhurried. Then, little by little, light began to come. I cannot tell you exactly how to describe this light, because there is nothing on earth that compares to it. It was not like sunlight, and it was not like any artificial light I had ever seen. It was soft, but it filled everything completely. It did not hurt my eyes. Instead, it felt like the light was looking at me as much as I was looking at it, if that makes any sense at all. As the light grew, I felt something else grow inside me too, peace. Not the kind of peace you feel after a good meal or a good night's sleep, but a peace that reached all the way down into the deepest, most worried part of me, the part that had been afraid for years. That part of me, the one that stayed up at night, reading about disasters and timelines, simply stopped being afraid. It was like someone had reached inside my chest and gently untied a knot that had been there for so long I had forgotten it could be untied. I also felt fully known. I do not just mean that someone knew my name or my history. I mean that every single thought I had ever had, every fear, every mistake, every secret worry, all of it was known completely, and yet there was no judgment attached to it. There was only love. A love so complete that it left no room for the fear I had carried my whole life. It was in this light that I became aware of a presence near me. I do not want to describe this presence in a way that sounds too dramatic, because that is not how it felt. It felt natural, like meeting someone you have always known but never had the chance to actually sit down with. This was a heavenly messenger, a guide, radiant in a way that is hard to put into normal words. There was a brightness to this being that came from somewhere deep inside, not just from the outside. I did not hear words the way you hear someone speaking out loud in a room. It was more like understanding came to me directly, like thoughts being placed gently into my mind, clear and full of meaning. He showed me that I was being given something important to see. He let me know that what I was about to experience was not meant to frighten me. It was meant to correct something inside me, something that had grown twisted over many years without me even realizing it. I remember feeling a strange mix of relief and shame in that moment. Relief because the love I was feeling was so strong it pushed away most of my fear. Shame because I began to suspect that what I had built my faith around for years was not what God had actually intended for me to focus on. The next thing I experienced is hard for me to put into words, but I will try my best. It was as if a kind of window opened in front of me, and through it I began to see images, not like a movie exactly, but more like memories that were not my own, yet I could feel them as if they were happening to me. I saw believers all over the world, gripped by fear about the future. I saw men and women glued to screens, watching videos about the end of the world the same way I had done for years. I saw arguments breaking out between believers over different theories about when certain events would happen. I saw constant worry on people's faces, worry about being left behind, worry about suffering, worry about not knowing enough, never feeling like they had figured it out completely. I recognized myself in every single one of those images. It was painful to watch, but it was not delivered with cruelty. It felt more like being shown a mirror gently, so I could finally see what I had refused to see while I was alive. He showed me how many believers, people who truly loved Jesus, had slowly shifted their attention away from a relationship with him and on to trying to solve a puzzle. They were so focused on escaping judgment, so focused on proving their theories right, so focused on fear of what might happen, that they had missed something much more important, hiding right in the middle of it all. I felt a heaviness in my heart as I watched these scenes, because I understood that I had done the same thing for years. I had turned something meant to bring hope into something that brought me constant stress. I had taken my eyes off of Jesus and placed them on charts, dates, and theories instead. Then, the images began to change. The fear in the scenes started giving way to something else. I began to see believers with expressions on their faces I had never associated with talk about the last days before. Their eyes were filled with expectation, not dread. There was joy on their faces instead of anxiety, hope instead of the heavy worry I had carried for years. He let me understand something in that moment that I will never forget. The return of Jesus, the event so many call the rapture, was never meant to be primarily about escaping pain or avoiding judgment. That was never supposed to be the center of it. The true center, the real heartbeat of that moment, has always been about being reunited with Jesus himself. It is, at its core, about going to meet him. As that understanding settled into me, something shifted deep inside my chest, the same place where fear used to live. The shift was slow but powerful, the way warmth spreads through your body after stepping into sunlight on a cold day. My focus, for the very first time in years, moved away from dates and events and rested fully on a person, on Jesus, on the idea of finally seeing him face to face. After this, the atmosphere around me began to change again. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something enormous. Above me, or maybe all around me, it is hard to say exactly, the sky, if that is even the right word for what I saw, began to open. Light poured through in a way that is impossible to fully explain. And then, I witnessed something that words cannot properly hold. I saw the appearing of Jesus. I do not feel comfortable describing every single detail, because I am afraid that no matter how careful I am with my words, I will somehow make it smaller than it actually was. What I can tell you is that the glory coming from him was overwhelming, more powerful than anything I had ever experienced or imagined. It was not frightening glory. It was glory completely filled with love, the kind of love that makes you want to fall down, not out of fear, but out of pure adoration. I felt his holiness in a way that made every flaw in my own life feel small and far away, not because he pointed them out with anger, but because his purity was so complete that everything else simply faded next to it. I felt overwhelming worship rise up inside me, worship I did not have to force, worship that came naturally, the way breathing comes naturally. I wept. I am not ashamed to say that. I wept in a way I had never wept before, tears that came from somewhere deeper than sadness, deeper than joy even. Somewhere that I think only opens up when you are finally standing in front of the one you were created for. In that moment, every single thing I had spent my life chasing, money, comfort, recognition, even the endless hours I had spent studying prophecy, all of it felt so small. Not unimportant in a cruel way, just small, the way a single candle looks small standing next to the sun. Nothing on earth, nothing I had ever wanted or worked for, could compare to what I was experiencing in that presence. Then, I began to see something else unfold around me, almost like layers being added to what I was already witnessing. I saw believers gathering, more people than I could ever count, from every nation, every background, every generation that has ever lived. There was no separation between them, no division based on where they had come from or what language they had spoken on earth. I saw what I understood to be those who had already died in their faith rising up, and I saw others, those who had still been alive, suddenly changed in an instant, transformed in ways I cannot fully describe. There were reunions happening everywhere I looked, family members embracing after long separations, friends laughing together with a kind of joy that had no shadow of sadness mixed into it. There was celebration in every direction, but it was not loud or chaotic. It was full, complete, and peaceful, all at the same time. I noticed something important in all of this. There was no fear anywhere, no panic, no confusion about what was happening. Only joy, pure and overflowing, the kind of joy I had never associated with this moment before, even though I had spent years thinking about it. After this, the guide gently brought my attention to something else, something that was harder for me to face. He began to show me pieces of my own life on earth. I saw years spent chasing a better job title, more money in the bank, recognition from people whose opinions I now realized mattered far less than I had believed at the time. I saw comfort that I had protected carefully, sometimes at the cost of time I could have spent with my family or in prayer. I saw small pleasures I had clung to, things that felt important in the moment but disappeared from memory almost as quickly as they happened. It was not shown to me with anger. It was shown with a kind of sadness, gentle but honest, helping me see clearly how much of my limited time on earth had been spent on things that simply did not last. I felt regret in that moment, a deep ache for the hours I had spent worrying about prophecy timelines instead of spending that same time growing closer to the one the prophecy was actually pointing to. The guide then showed me something about readiness, and this part changed me deeply. I saw believers who had truly been ready for this moment, not because they had figured out every theory or predicted every event correctly, but because they had built their lives around a real relationship with Jesus. Their readiness was not built on fear. It was built on obedience, on quiet faithfulness, on surrender that did not need an audience to be real. I was also shown areas in my own life that I had kept hidden even from myself, small compromises I had made over the years, moments where I had chosen comfort over obedience, quiet sins I had allowed to stay quiet instead of bringing them honestly before God. None of this was shown to shame me into despair. It was shown so I could finally understand what readiness actually means. Holiness mattered. Faithfulness mattered. Closeness with Christ mattered far more than knowledge about end-time events ever could. Then, I was shown something that brought me to tears all over again. I saw believers who had suffered greatly while they were alive on earth, people who had been persecuted for their faith, families who had lost everything because they refused to deny Jesus, individuals who had endured pain and hardship that I could not fully imagine. But here in this place, I saw their reward. I saw comfort surrounding them so completely that the suffering they had endured seemed almost like a distant memory, no longer carrying any weight over them. I understood, in a way I had never understood before, that earthly suffering, no matter how long it lasts, is temporary. The rewards waiting on the other side are not symbolic or distant ideas. They are real, lasting, and far greater than anything that was lost or endured here. After this, I was shown something that filled me with a different kind of urgency. I saw countless people still on earth, still living their normal lives, completely unaware of what was coming for them, completely unprepared for eternity. I felt a compassion rise up in me that I had never felt with this much intensity before. It was mixed with grief, a heavy sadness for those who did not yet know Jesus, who had not yet turned their hearts toward him. I understood clearly that time on earth, for every single person, is limited. Souls matter more than anything else I had spent my life worrying about. The message of the gospel, simple as it is, carries weight that nothing else in this world can compare to. I felt a strong desire rise up in me to go back and tell people, not about timelines or theories, but about Jesus himself. Then, I was given a glimpse of something I can only describe as home. I want to be careful here because I do not want to focus too much on describing the scenery of this place, because honestly that is not what stood out the most to me. What stood out was the presence of Jesus filling everything completely. There was a sense of belonging there that I had never felt anywhere on earth. Not even in my own home with my own family, as much as I love them. There was peace that did not have to be maintained or protected. It simply existed, fully, completely, all around. I understood that heaven is wonderful, not because of any place or any feature within it, but because Jesus is there. The greatest treasure was never the location. The greatest treasure has always been his presence. In that moment, I finally understood that this thing I had feared and obsessed over for years, the rapture, is ultimately about going home. Not escaping something, going home. It was after this that the guide let me know my time had not yet come to stay. I felt a quiet pull, gentle but firm, like being called back from somewhere far away. Before I returned, I was given a message, not in dramatic words, but in a clear understanding that settled into me completely. I was to look up instead of living in fear. I was to stay faithful, to live a holy life, not out of fear of punishment, but out of love for the one who had shown me so much grace. I was to remain ready, not by figuring out dates, by staying close to him every single day. I was to tell others what I had seen, and I was not to fear the future any longer. The return happened suddenly. One moment I was filled with peace beyond anything I had known, and the next I felt a sharp, heavy pull back into pain. My chest hurt again, my body felt stiff and foreign, like putting on clothes that no longer fit right. I heard voices around me, urgent, relieved, crying out that I was breathing again, that my heart had started again. I opened my eyes to bright hospital lights, machines beeping steadily, and my wife's face above me, tears streaming down, her hand gripping mine so tightly it almost hurt. The nurses and doctors were moving quickly around me, checking monitors, speaking to each other in quick, careful sentences. Everything felt too loud, too bright, too heavy after where I had just been. But underneath all of that confusion, the peace I had felt on the other side stayed with me. It did not leave when I came back. Since that day, my life has changed completely. The fear that used to control so much of my thinking simply is not there anymore, not in the same suffocating way it used to be. I still care about what the Bible says regarding the future, but it no longer drives me with anxiety the way it once did. My love for Jesus has grown deeper than I ever thought possible. My interest in prophecy is still there, but it has become healthier, calmer, less about solving a puzzle, and more about anticipating a reunion with someone I love. I no longer spend my nights scrolling through theories and timelines. Instead, I spend that time in prayer, in quiet conversation with Him, in gratitude for the second chance I was given. My relationship with Christ has become the center of my life in a way it never was before, even though I always thought it already was. I am sharing this with you now because I believe it matters. Not to frighten you, not to add another theory to the long list of things people argue about regarding the end times, but simply to remind you, and to remind myself every single day, that none of this is about escaping or about fear. It has always been about Him. That is where the man's story ends, in his own words, just as he shared it with me. I think the lesson here is simple, even though it took Him dying and coming back to fully understand it. The rapture, the return of Jesus that so many believers spend their time arguing and worrying about, was never meant to be the center of our attention by itself. Jesus Himself is the center. Meeting Him, knowing Him, being close to Him now today is what truly matters. Every theory, every timeline, every fear we carry about the future fades completely when compared to the simple truth of being with Him. So now, before you end this video, I want to leave you with a question to sit with. If you knew without any doubt that you were going to meet Jesus today, not in fear, but face to face in love, would your life today look any different than it does right now? Let me know in the comment, and I pray that even your current life is not representing Christ. I pray that you start making changes now. Thank you for watching. If you have been blessed by this testimony, please like this video. Share it with your loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss any of our future videos. Remain blessed.